Welcome to the Leeson House Classroom with me, Peter. Today, I'm going to be talking you through some sources of secondary data that are really useful for any investigation or for gaining some background knowledge about a location. And we're going to start with one that I think is really cool, and it's called CDRC Maps. So we're just going to type that into Google, and it's actually this first one that comes up that we want to look at. So the index of multiple deprivation. And what this will do is it'll load up a map of the UK, centered on London to start with, and it's a map of the index of multiple deprivation, where the UK is broken up into 32,844 different areas. And each area is ranked to show where it falls on the index of multiple deprivation. So if you are ranked 32,844, you are the least deprived area in the UK. And if you are ranked number 1, you are the most deprived area in the UK. And you can see on the right-hand side here, the color code is actually broken down into different deciles. So every 10% is put into a different color, with this dark green being the top 10 and this dark red being the least, or the bottom 10%. So the most deprived areas. If we go over to the left-hand side here, we've got an option to search for a postcode. So I'm going to search for the Leeson House postcode and have a look at that area. Okay. With CDRC, once you've found the area that you want to investigate, if you just hover over in the right-hand side under area information, it shows you the rank and the decile that that area falls into. So the area that Leeson House is in is ranked 21,995, which is actually pretty high. Okay, and we can use this to compare different areas. So I'm going to move over to Boscombe, which is one of our field sites, and we're going to have a look and see where that falls. So if I just zoom in over here, okay. You can see Boscombe actually comes out quite red, and that's because this area of Boscombe is the most deprived area on the south coast. You can see there that it's currently ranked 528. So if I was comparing that to Leeson, there's quite a huge difference there. The other nice thing about CDRC is up at the top here, we have a timeline. So at the moment it's displaying the most recent data from 2019, but we can go back in time to see how an area changes. So back in 2015, this area of Boscombe was actually 226. So in the last 4 years or so, it's actually improved, pretty much doubled its ranking. Okay, but this site also goes back to 2010. So you can compare different areas. You can see what your postcode falls or where your postcode ranks. And another fun game to try is to see if you can find the most deprived area in the UK and the least deprived area. So the highest and lowest ranks on the scale. But it works a bit like Google Maps. You can just drag it around. You can zoom in and out. And you type in postcodes over here. You can also, if you don't want to see all the information, you can minimize the keys and you can move them to an area that's more useful to you to have a look at. Okay. Another great website that links into this and actually breaks down the index of deprivation into its component parts is UK local area. So again, if we type that into Google, it's this first one that comes up, the UK local area neighborhood profile. If we click on that, again, we can type in a postcode, but it also allows you to type in the name of a town or a place to have a look at. We're going to stick with the same postcode for Leeson House and see what that comes up with. So you can see it brings up a selection of graphs to have a look at that's broken down into the different areas that make up the index of deprivation. So you can see there that this area of the Leeson House is based in is better than 70% of areas in England overall. It's also got information about income deprivation, employment, education, etc. And these graphs are really nice and easy to read and allow great comparison or easy comparison between two sites. It's worth noting, however, that this site is using the 2015 data and hasn't yet been updated to the 2019 data. Hopefully that'll do that soon, but for now, just be aware it is the 2015 data, and you can see that down here. Okay, it says in English Index of Deprivation 2015. Okay. The other nice thing about this website is that it has other information for you to look at about the area. So we've got census data here, which allows us to build up a better picture about the demographics. So around Leeson House, there's 1,491 usual residents. It's a more or less a 50-50 split of males and females. We can even see the density of people per hectare at the bottom there. We've got different tabs for household, ethnicity, etc. There's also a section on the left for looking at properties for sale or house prices if you wanted to see, compare different areas in terms of how well off they are or what sort of prices the houses were fetching in that area. So when you combine these two sites, it gives you a really nice overview of what an area might be like in terms of the index of deprivation, but also in terms of the demography. The other site we're going to look at, which again pairs nicely with these two sites, is parallel.co.uk. Okay, you can see that at the top there. So Parallel is a company that produces really nice visual maps and data that goes with it. If we scroll down, we can see that they've got a map for population pyramids. So let's have a little look at that. I'm going to turn it to 2D, so hopefully it loads a little bit quicker. But you can see on the left here, it's got a different scale. So we've got density of people, we've got 3D or 2D model. But just like the CDRC map, it's going to break down the UK into lots of different regions. And when we hover over each of those regions, it's going to bring up a population pyramid for it. So you can see there, this area has a population density of 119 people per kilometre squared. And it's quite an equal distribution of ages other than that top three brackets. So by, again, comparing areas, we can see whether an area is an elderly population, a young population, a working population. Okay, it tells us a lot about the demographics, particularly when you compare it with or combine it with UK local area census data. So again, really easy to use. We can just hover over any area we want to see. This one also gives you the size of the area, which is quite important because clearly some of these areas are significantly bigger than others, and you might want to consider that when looking at the data. The other nice map that Parallel has, aside from the pollution maps here, is color your own map. Okay. And this one is really useful for things like land use surveys, as it gives a really detailed map of an area in terms of the buildings in that area, the infrastructure, and so on. So if we go back down to Swanage, I'll show you this in a bit more detail. Once it's loaded up, you'll see how much detail we get about Swanage in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the buildings. And we could take this out into the field and use it for our surveys as we walked up and down the street, or we could use it with Google Street View if we wanted to do some secondary data research and actually color in these different buildings in terms of what they're used for, whether they're retail, whether they're residential, and so on. You can also use the color scheme on the left-hand side here, but it's a bit more generic. So all of the buildings would be blue. All of the grassy woodland areas would be, well, no, green in this case. We could do roads in blue and so on. Okay. But if you wanted to do it in a bit more detail and actually do the individual buildings, as I said, you could take this out into the field, or you could use something like Google Street View. So have a go with these three different sources of secondary data, have a play, have an explore, and see what you can find out about your local area and see if there's an area of comparable size that you could actually compare it to.